Well, now, good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, Conservative Talk and Awesome Rock. We are filming once again here at our Ambush Studios here in Worcester, Massachusetts, and the interviews just keep rolling in as we keep rolling along in 2015. Second time appearing on the show, calling in from Skype, my good friend Mike Isenberg. Mike and I know each other through the Boston Tea Party, and our good friend Patrick and Ed, who's going to be putting together a great event coming up September 21st. Mike Isenberg is the author of the book Full Asylum. You can get that at fullasylum.com. It's probably on Amazon and everything else. Mike will tell us exactly all the detail on that. I was looking at Mike's site, though. I burst out laughing, Mike, so this is your introduction, Mike. Mike Isenberg, and this is your writing, Mike. Mike Isenberg has had a checkered career as a Six Sigma black belt, a weapons merchant, astrophysicist, and manufacturer of cigarette butts. He resides somewhere in New England with 878 books and an elderly cat that bites people. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Isenberg. Thanks, man. Welcome back to the show.
Good intro. Good intro.
Thank you for that intro. You know, people think that when I say I manufactured cigarette butts, I'm a chain smoker.
Well, there you go. I know that.
Actually, I literally worked in a factory that manufactured cigarette butts.
No kidding, really. What was it called? Here in Massachusetts? What was that?
No, it was down in Southwest Virginia.
That's about right.
Real conservative country there,
Sure.
and the company was called Celanese Acetate. So.
Acetate. Okay.
That's what you use acetate for, clothing and cigarette butts.
I actually have promised my 10-year-old that I'm going to quit smoking by the time I turn 51, which is in a week or so.
Yeah, well, good luck with that, really. So, Mike, how's the book doing? How's things going with you?
Things are going very well.
Good.
Keep getting new reviews for Full Asylum with 4 and 5 stars out in Amazon, so I'm happy to see that. People seem to be very, very much like the heroine of the book. She's a professional wrestler. You don't want to mess with her.
Is that the character Cherry Tart?
That's Cherry Tart.
Cherry
yes.
Tart, right, exactly.
She has a few harsh words to say about feminists.
Right. I'm going to pick up the book from you next month, but I don't want to go through Amazon and stuff. I'm going to send something to you personally because I want you to sign it for me. Can you do that?
Absolutely.
Excellent. That'd be great. Excellent. Excellent. So anyway, in Full Asylum, I mean, the economy's busted down, broken down again. I mean, there's actually talk that supposedly we're heading for another crash anyway, and walk us a little bit through the book and how it relates to the possibility that we could have another crash.
Well, I kind of set the thing in the wake of the crash after the next one. I refer to it as the third financial crisis, and it creates an environment where the politicians start looking for scapegoats.
There you go.
And they pass something, and they pass something called the Federal Economic Sabotage Act, and this gives them the power that they need to, come after us average citizens if we don't fall into line. And so you see tax accountants getting arrested for finding deductions, and government creeps knock down their door in the middle of the night. You
Sounds familiar.
So
Wow. Sounds very familiar.
Yeah. Well, it's actually a little disturbing how much of the things have become big issues, in the 3 years since the book came out. I mean, NSA surveillance is a good example. The hero of my book, the reason that he got on the government's radar is because he wrote an encryption algorithm that the government couldn't crack. And so, if you can use that for your emails, the government can't eavesdrop on you, and so the government on his tail.
So something like that becomes illegal. I mean, it gets to the point where I was just reading a little quote there that Ken Mandiel put up on the Worcester Tea Party site. Something about even like, when you have the minimum wage law, it doesn't necessarily create jobs. What it does is it makes employment below a certain level illegal, so then it just incentivizes unemployment and more benefits, because after all, if you're going to start a business, you're going to do something, why should you be forced to pay this set amount? And wouldn't you, as a business person, do something, whatever it is in your power, to try to not hire employees or try to minimize their hours, to minimize your impact on that? But then at that point in time, that the government could step in and say, well, no, you have to hire people. Now we have to pass another law forcing, and this thing just snowballs down the road, doesn't it?
I've actually heard that there are people out there trying to create encryption and stuff like that the government can't break.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, as a matter of fact, I talk about this in the book. Economists will tell us that markets will give you the optimum distribution of all your resources and the jobs and so on. So anything the government does to interfere with markets, including minimum wage, pushes you away from the optimum and makes your society poorer as a whole.
Sure.
All of which is very serious, so I should mention that my book is a comedy.
No, that's true. That is true. It is a comedy.
Of course, George Orwell and Ayn Rand and Glenn Beck all did a good job with the grim version of the dystopian story, so I wanted to go in a slightly different direction. So I have some of the more absurd aspects of the nanny state. You have to get a whole bunch of paperwork to go into a bar and order a hamburger.
Sounds about right.
If you really want to impress your date, forget wine. Come up with a dusty old bottle of Coca-Cola, because that's completely illegal.
Yeah, that's about right. And we're getting to that point. It sounds like from the way you described the book, it reminds me of a science fiction writer back in the '60s, Larry Niven, who wrote great science fiction. He's a very little-known author, real science fiction geeks, and he really has this dystopian view of the future, and it is just outrageously comical, the things that these characters have to go through just to get through their day-to-day lives. Even teleporting from one place to another becomes a big, amazing heart attack. Again, you got to look the author up.
I didn't go far enough in the future for teleportation, and I won't go into too much what I did with airport security. I'll just say that it involves a privacy curtain and a rubber glove.
There you go.
Yeah.
What do you do for a living? What is your MOD? What do you do?
This is my full-time pursuit.
You want to be an author and writer?
I previously, as I think I said, I believe in among my list of accomplishments there were weapons merchant. I previously worked in the defense industry, and the contract I was working on was coming to an end, and I looked at my bucket list, and managing another subcontract was nowhere on the list, but finishing writing full Asylum is, so I bit the bullet, and now, it's a full-time job for me when I'm not out promoting full Asylum or enjoying stuff like coming on your show.
Sure.
I'm working on my next book.
There you go, and that segues right into the next question. Can you give us some hints? How's that coming? Because I know the last time you and I talked, I think it was the Evan Sayet thing, and you had said hopefully by the time I get on your show, I'll have something for you. So look at him, he's scratching. He doesn't have anything.
I didn't know you were going to have me on my new show so soon. I'm about halfway through the first draft.
There you go.
Little month, coming up on the 60% point.
Good.
It's a much more serious book than Full Asylum. It's about the Islamic world.
Oh, God.
Oh, goodness.
And in particular...
There's going to be a fatwa on Mike Isenberg. I can see it a year from now.
At least I'll know somebody read the book if that happens.
There you go.
They'll have a full caliphate on Mike.
Well, this book takes place 900 years ago when there was a caliphate.
There you go.
If you go back 900 years and if you wanted to find culture and technology on this planet, there were two places you could go. One was China, which was in the Sung Dynasty, and the other was the Muslim world. And I know many conservatives don't believe me when I say that there was culture and technology.
This is a fact. Continue. It's a fact.
And I could talk extensively about it, but I won't go into detail. But what is also true is the Muslim world turned their back on that. You know, whereas in the 1090s they had a civilization that was technologically oriented, tolerant towards Jews and Christians, and lax in their enforcement of Sharia. You could get a bottle of wine if you wanted.
Sure.
By 100 years later, all that had changed. Instead of writing books about science, they were burning them in Baghdad, literally. They cracked down on the enforcement of Sharia, and they threw all the Jews and the Christians out of the government and did everything they could to make their lives miserable.
Of course they did, yes.
Well, did they do that? Did they do
so I want to tell this over a series of books. I want to tell the story of how this transition happened, you know, how the Muslim world went from tolerant and scientific and oriented to reason to intolerant and obsessed with Sharia and mystical and focused more on mysticism.
Yeah, and we don't...
And how they got from a civilization that kind of looked like us to a civilization that gave us ISIS.
Exactly, and speaking about ISIS, yeah. What you just said about how they turned away from reason and technology, and they even are, today they're doing it, they're turning away from ancient history. I guess the city of Nimrud was just basically blown up. There's all sorts of video out there on social media, how they blew the city up, they destroyed all the artifacts there. This is a common tactic amongst radical Islam. I don't know why. One explanation was given to me some time ago, by a Jewish friend of mine who was on the show a little while ago, and he basically said that they don't want any evidence of anything existing before Islam. In other words, there was nothing, and then there was Islam. It's basically their mentality.
I mean, that's kind of how they look at it. You know, they refer in Arabic to the time before Islam as the time of darkness. And the other, you know, of course, the other complication is that these monuments are statues, and they're prohibited.
Exactly. Yeah, idolatry, right.
But you know something? Even in the worst of the period that I'm writing about, those monuments stood through it. They let them survive, and to some extent, they were proud of them. So this particular aspect of ISIS, even though almost everything about ISIS, you know, resembles, you know, Islam 900, 800 years ago, this blowing up of monuments and destruction of monuments is something new and something very tragic.
So Mike, you've done the research and stuff like that. So can you basically tell us when the Islamic faith and science came out with the algebra? Because, I mean, if they came out with algebra...
Yeah, things like early not space exploration, but charting the stars. I mean, look at the ancient Egypt, the Egyptians, how they put the pyramids together. They point to certain constellations. But I think this is what he's talking about, is that there was a before time when they adopted this idea of science and technology and reason.
So my question
the peak of Muslim science was in the 900s.
Okay.
That was, I'm pretty sure that's when Al-Khwarizmi lived, who invented algebra. It's when Avicenna lived, who wrote what became the textbook on medicine. His Canon of Medicine was the leading book both in Europe and in the Muslim world, really to the dawn of modern medicine. That's when Biruni, the great astronomer, lived, who seemed to have some ideas that this universe where the Earth was at the center was wrong. He seemed to be leaning towards, you know, what we now know to be true. The sun was at the center.
Right.
So that was the peak. And then they started falling off after that. And what happened was about 100 years later, in the 1090s, there were always people in the Muslim world who felt that this science was somehow not Islamic. It couldn't prove the great truths that Muhammad had taught. It all came from the Greeks, and they were kind of foreign. They used all these technical terms that nobody understood. So there were always people who were suspicious of science. What happened in the 1090s is these people found a very effective voice. His name was Abu Hamid Ghazali. He was the head of the University of Baghdad, and he wrote a book called The Incoherence of the Philosophers. And basically this book made these points, about science being un-Islamic and not useful. And that really was kind of the last nail in the coffin, just because Ghazali was such a good writer and his books were so influential. And to give you an idea of how influential he was, and by the way, he's going to be a character in my novel.
Sure.
He lived in real life, but in my fiction book, he's going to be a character. And to give you an idea of how influential he was, the guy who started the Muslim Brotherhood kept some of Ghazali's work on his nightstand for bedtime reading, and ISIS quotes Ghazali in their propaganda.
There you go.
So he is still hugely influential in the Muslim.
So they were basically all flat earthers.
No, they actually all did know that the Earth was round. That was something they all seemed to get right. But so anyway, I'll write this series of books telling about this transition. The first book in the series is going to be just a good murder mystery, because at this time there was a sultan and his prime minister, and they both died under suspicious circumstances 6 weeks apart in the year 1092. And that was in real life. In my fiction book, I'm going to solve the mystery. And I think I've got a kind of unique solution that most historians have overlooked.
Great. And don't spill the beans. I can't wait to have you on with you. Now, it's interesting that you say that about the way they looked at science and technology as not being Islamic enough. What I find ironic about just Islam in general, again, let's take ISIS, and we can take the Taliban, any of these radical groups that are out there. They reject science, they reject technology, but they love their new guns, they love their weapons, they have no problem using two-way communication radios, they have no problems fueling up trucks, driving tanks, building missiles, nuclear weapons, but technology, it's not Islamic enough. You see the irony, the oxymoron that's there.
It was Hitler that brought them all that stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a paradox.
But it suits their purpose. It's kind of like liberalism.
It suits their purpose. But there is a difference. I don't know if you've read Ayn Rand at all.
Yes, I have.
She talks in Atlas Shrugged how even the most biggest, most mystic, stupid thugs still manage to use technology so long as somebody else who's more rational invents it for them, and I think that's kind of what's going on.
Well, again, I was going to draw a correlation to liberalism, where certain constitutional laws they'll use as long as it suits their purpose, but by and large we all know that as far as the Constitution is concerned, it's this thing that's getting in the way of them taking over complete power. Let's take the concept of democracy. Everybody keeps saying America is a democracy, but then when it comes time to pass a vote, and then they find out that what they're pushing is overwhelmingly defeated by a majority of the vote, i.e. a democracy, then no, we're gonna have to go to the Supreme Court now. We're gonna have to go around this. So it only suits their purpose when it suits their purpose.
No, I think there's definitely a all's fair in love and war attitude on the part of the left, the pragmatic attitude that there are no principles, just whatever works to meet our goal. That's what we believe this moment. And that's why you get people like Barack Obama as a senator, when there's a Republican president attacking the national debt as, a huge failure of leadership. and then embracing it when he's president, and adding significantly to it, and
Hey.
raising the debt ceiling time after time.
Now, how did you tell a quick story if you can? How did you lean more towards conservatism, lean towards the Boston Tea Party, and you don't have to tell about how you joined it or anything. For me, I grew up as a young kid. I was a Democrat. I was a liberal. I was raised that way. It was a metamorphosis, a catharsis that took place over a number of years until I got to the point where I am now. Were you always conservative, raised conservative? What's your story there?
So my father was a small businessman. He was a distributor for Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was raised in the business. My parents put me to work and people think I made this up, but at age 3, they put me to work.
Sure.
It wasn't a very difficult job. I had to separate the yellow invoices from the pink invoices and throw away the carbon paper. If you
Was
remember
that a
carbon
union
paper.
job?
Was that a union scale job? Were you paid?
Was that a
you were paid
job for
union
your
fees,
dad?
great wages,
Your
right?
dad. You
But I did not get minimum wage. You recall, as you probably know, in the workplace, the minimum wage has to be posted. But it was another 3 years till I learned how to read and said, "Well, what's this?" But anyway, my parents insisted there was an exemption in the law for family.
There actually is.
But
There actually
anyway,
is.
but having grown up in that business, I got to see value of hard work. I got to see how difficult government makes it for people to run a business. And frankly, I got to have a little bit of disdain, contempt for people who don't pull their own weight.
Exactly.
So I always valued those things, and when I was old enough to think about politics, I embraced more libertarianism than conservatism in my case. But definitely to that sort of mindset. I think the other thing is, since I grew up in what Barney Frank's district, although then it was Father Drynan's district, if you remember him.
Yes, I do.
And so being a conservative was like rebellion when you're in your teens in that part of the country.
How can you do
The young
such
Republicans with the tie and the blue suit.
What's that?
The young Republicans with the tie and the blue suit.
There you go.
So anyway, yeah. So you basically grew up libertarian / conservative. Yeah, that's very interesting. And so, and what's amazing is that I find that I think I have a little bit more insight because I once at one point in time was on the other side. It's like I kind of know the playbook. I'm used to seeing the rhetoric, the dialogue, and the sayings, the mantras, the way it always seems to be of we have to do something about that. Somebody ought to pass a law. I'm at the point now where it's like people say, well, what did Congress do today? Well, hopefully they did nothing today.
Because
And
we have enough
it's
laws.
like,
We have enough
we
laws.
have enough laws. Anyway, so let's move on. Again, speaking of politics, let's shift gears a little bit here in the interview. Presidential race. It's becoming a quagmire out there. We got a lot of people, and then of course we got good old Donald Trump out there. And I know the libertarians tend to lean a little more towards Rand, but he's kind of been off the radar lately as far as news coverage is concerned.
Well, I think everybody's been off the radar thanks to Mr. Trump. They've only gotten on the radar to the extent that they've been able to be as outrageous as he is, like some of the things that Huckabee and Cruz have had to say about the Iran treaty.
Right. Right. The Iran treaty is basically a bad deal. We'll get to that in a few minutes. What I find interesting is how instantaneously. Actually, I'm not really hearing a lot from Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders.
Thank God.
They do have. No, I'm talking about their response to Donald Trump. I think it's amazing that the Republicans have instantaneously, in a cavalcade, have just jumped all over Donald Trump. These guys are scared shitless, aren't they?
I think the Republican establishment are scared of Trump. I get why so many conservatives are just delighted with Trump because, we worked so hard to get a Republican Congress, and when they got there, we got nothing to show for it. They caved on Loretta Lynch. They caved on executive amnesty. It looks like they're gonna.
They caved on Obamacare. They caved on everything.
Parenthood, and on and on and on. And so when somebody comes along who is outspoken, who is unapologetic, who speaks his views with confidence, we respond to that.
Certainly.
And I actually was listening to Trump's announcement speech, and I was just so thrilled that he said, "I'm proud of how much money I made, and I'm proud of what a success I am." I think businessmen ought to be, especially honest businessmen, ought to be getting up and claiming pride for that and not being apologetic. This is why we get in so much trouble. And I think the Republican establishment, if they weren't so scared, ought to learn from this, that if you want to win elections, if you want to get people excited, this is what you need to do, is to speak your mind. And by the way, who's getting attention on the other side? Bernie Sanders, the guy who's doing the same thing.
You're right. Absolutely true. I mean, and here's the thing about him. You're right. He's outspoken. He's unapologetic. And the other thing, too, that just as much as Donald Trump has been proud that he's a businessman and made all his money, Bernie Sanders isn't afraid, and he's borderline proud, to just come right out and say that he is a socialist. I mean, and Hillary Clinton will lie to you and say that she's not. Bernie Sanders will come right out and say it, and I think this is exciting. This is as exciting for the left as Donald Trump is for, well, conservatives on the right.
Well,
Absolutely.
just
now, I think what we need to do as conservatives and libertarians is vet Mr. Trump, right? Because we've been disappointed time and again by people who sounded good, and then when they got into office, they weren't very conservative at all. I mean, this may be heresy, but we elected George W. Bush. I voted for him twice. He sounded like a conservative. And then what did we get? We got Sarbanes-Oxley.
Yep.
We got Medicare Part D.
Yep.
We got TARP. We got huge increases in spending and regulation. So I think, the question is Trump really mean the things that he's saying? And I think we ought to take a good look at that, and I think there are some reasons to be suspicious.
I thank you so much for saying
I agree with that,
because I've been promoting that for years, even since back in the 2008 elections. Vet all your candidates. You can't have a one-third term senator become president and have him know what he's going to do. And then with Mr. Trump, if you look at all the founding fathers, every single one of the founding fathers was a businessman first. Now Donald Trump is a businessman, so he knows business.
And I think also with Donald Trump, some people are even bringing up, well, he has no foreign policy experience. What do you mean? This is a guy that does international business deals for breakfast.
All over the place.
So, I mean, all over the place. He's all over the world. He's always dealing with other countries and other companies all over the world. So, ipso de facto, there's your foreign policy experience right there. I mean, it's almost street level foreign policy.
And for prompts to Donald Trump he's the only Republican candidate that has any military experience whatsoever, because he actually went to military school.
He went to an academy, right?
He went to a military academy. He knows how to stand in line and march and be told what to do.
So, Mike, Charles Murray is coming to Harvard University, it seems. We've been working on that through the Worcester Tea Party, Boston Tea Party. I hope to see you there.
I just read his book while I was on vacation.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Great. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. I looked him up on Wikipedia and stuff. I was like, holy crap, this guy's a busy guy.
How does a person like you find a chance for a vacation?
Really, how do you find a chance for a vacation?
Actually, this is my first vacation since I started writing 4 years ago. But my sister got married, so I had to go on vacation.
Well, there you go.
Well,
There
hopefully you enjoy it.
So, folks, the book is Full Asylum. He's working on his second book, a little fictional / historical piece about Islam, the Caliphates. Monteferro Press, that's your company, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you started that company, why? Because you couldn't really, for last time I think you said you couldn't really get a publisher to take your book, or what was...
That's right. When I got Full Asylum, that was after the second draft. It was time to start looking for publishers, and I had done my homework, and I knew the reason that authors get so many rejections is they don't do their homework. They don't find publishers who are good matches for their books. So I went and I studied and I looked through directories who would publish a conservative / libertarian dystopian comedy, spy novel, and
what do I classify that as?
and the answer I came to was no one. So I didn't believe in giving up. I went to my town hall. I filled out a doing business as application, and now I'm the Monteferro Press.
There you go. Great.
Awesome
Excellent.
for you.
Mike, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. We got to get ready for our overnight show starting at midnight tonight. We got a few things to do. I know you're a busy guy and you're on vacation now, so I won't keep you. MonteferroPress.com, FullAsylum.com. Mike, thank you so much, man, for coming on the show again.
Mike.
Hope to see you at the Charles Murray thing. We'll talk again.
I will.
All right.
So-
See you later, Cap.
Sir.
Great. Great interview.
See, I can stand on top of it.